What up? It's your boy T-Bone Reaction. About to do some more basketball reactions. It's going to be a long one right here. As we want to check out a video from Wrestling with Gaming. As Wrestling Game do a lot of basketball, a lot of video game stories as well too. And this one I thought was a cool one as well too. This is the story behind one of the iconic arcade basketball game of all time, and that is not by Midway, and that's none other than NBA Jam. NBA Jam set the record on my childhood right there for sure, man. The arcade game with the high flying crazy out of this world dunks as well too. The commentary, I forgot who's the legendary voice of the "He's on fire, boom shakalaka, he's heating up." Yo, iconic voice to this day. I used them sound effects while I was DJing basketball games at my old college as well too, for dunks and shots and everything. Right. It was iconic though, and then swing into the Hang Time with NBA Hang Time. The later on NBC Showtime, and then it was the third one, Hoops, I think it's called. Either way though, and then he brought back NBA Jam, the original the format as well too. But other than that, without further ado, let's hear the story behind NBA Jam's 90s gaming mastery. Let's get it.
It's 1993. Thanks in part to the Chicago Bulls, basketball fever is sweeping the nation, and arcades are buzzing with the likes of Street Fighter II and Mortal Kombat.
Yep.
In the midst of this excitement, another creation from Chicago emerges that captures the hearts of basketball fans and gamers alike. A game that defied the laws of physics, where players soared through the air, dunked shattered backboards, and a voice boomed with catchphrases that became legendary. That game was NBA Jam.
Yep.
This is bad, man. This is bad.
But creating NBA Jam was no easy layup for Midway. In this video, we'll take a look at how a small team of passionate developers, armed with cutting-edge technology and an unyielding belief in their vision, created a game that captivated the world. From the NBA outright rejecting Midway's game proposal, to Midway having the NBA Jam name taken from them, this is the story of NBA Jam.
Welcome to Wrestling with Gaming.
Yep, that's the voice right there. Another thing about announcer voice Tim Kutro, and it was iconic as well too. The other thing that was so special about it, you can not only have you play some of your favorite players though too, you can add little codes and play with your favorite celebrities, video game character that unfortunately didn't last long on a certain version, and your mascot, etc., or some random folks that was part of the team for behind the scene creator teams and all that as well too. Anyway, it was so fun times, yo.
NBA Jam was the brainchild of Mark Turmel, a programmer who arrived at Williams in 1989, about a year after Williams had purchased Bally/Midway.
Okay.
The staff at Williams weren't impressed when they first met Turmel.
Oh, so Williams always been with Midway. Okay, that explains a lot why like a lot of this stuff around like Mortal Kombat 3, the time they did Mortal Kombat 3 on that was on the Williams when they put them on the on the game console. So they wanted, cause they want to take it. That's pretty much them taking full control of the home console video games for their games. Because for a minute, a lot of them were either Pro for and LGN for Sega, and for Nintendo NES, Super NES, it went to Acclaim. I remember that. Yup.
Between his long hair, big personality, and the loud clothes that he was wearing, they didn't
remember
see him
Mark
as
Turmel.
someone who could get a game produced, and discouraged Williams executive vice president Ken Fedesna from hiring him. Their tune changed when Mark's first game as team lead, 1990's Smash TV, was a big success.
He did that.
Talented
I remember
Williams
that.
Employees like NARC creator Eugene Jarvis and future Mortal Kombat co-creator John Tobias worked with Turmel on Smash TV. They and other Williams employees soon came to appreciate Turmel's technical.
That explains why Narc was like the earlier of the humanized character as well too, because there was some folks who was behind Mortal Kombat. Nice.
Prowess and creativity. Unfortunately, Mark and Tobias's next game, 1991's Total Carnage, proved to be a commercial failure. John Tobias moved on to work with Ed Boon on what would become Mortal Kombat, leaving a discouraged Mark Turmel unsure of what to do next. That is until Terminator 2 Judgment Day programmer George Petro suggested to Mark that he create a basketball game.
Nice.
In issue 116 of the excellent Retro Gamer magazine, Mark Turmel talked about how he had always been a big basketball fan who dreamed of owning an NBA team. So while it didn't take much to
wonder if he
convince
ever
him
did
to
it.
create a basketball game, Williams/Midway's own 1989 arcade hit, Arch Rivals, had already shown that there was a market for less realistic, arcade-like sports games. With its 2-on-2 gameplay, the ability to punch players without penalty, and backboard-shattering dunks, Arch Rivals may seem like the clear progenitor for NBA Jam, but Turmel had only played it a couple of times.
Ha! I can remember this. I can remember his high impact football. I remember because, like I said, I used to live in arcades as well as go to Dave Buster's as a kid, and this was like one of the games right here. And I love the arcade game. They have like humanized stuff in there as well too. I know it's by Williams. Wow.
It was actually the feel of 1990s high-impact football and its sequel, 1991's super high-impact football, that Mark Turmel wanted to bring to the world of basketball. Turmel also wanted his game's graphics to be digitized, the strength of Williams/Midway, who I'll just refer to as Midway going forward. Midway were digitized graphics pioneers and used digitized graphics in NARC, High Impact and Super High Impact Football, and Terminator 2 the arcade game. Turmel scouted local Chicago basketball players playing games of pickup and discovered a 6'5" flashy player by the name of Willie Morris Jr.
Oh, that's how they got Aaron Morris. He was pretty much the mocap. Okay.
Morris a job, and despite his initial skepticism, a few days later found himself in a warehouse midway.
So he's the
Morris was
because he's a hidden character on there along with Turmel and other creators of behind it. So that's why he's on there. He was the pretty much the mocap for him, the model athlete. Nice.
He dribbled, shot, passed, blocked, and pretended to play against an invisible person. But more importantly, Morris unleashed a slew of creative and over-the-top dunks that would become synonymous with NBA Jam. Digitized versions of Morris were used for all 4 players in Midway's pitch video to the NBA. But in order to capture different body sizes and skin tones, Turmel recruited 3 additional amateur and college players, Todd McLaren, Tony Scott, and Stephen Howard, who would go on to play in the NBA. Turmel assembled a development team of only 7 people, including himself, to work on NBA
and
Jam.
Tony Goski.
Unfortunately, the digitizing process turned out to be more challenging than expected. The dev team had painted the wall and floor of the warehouse blue and ordered plain gray uniforms that would be easy to key out. But the uniforms that came in were blue, and there wasn't enough time to paint the warehouse a different color. This resulted in artists John Carlton and Tony Goski having to manually cut the players out from the background for each frame, as well as correct for any blue bleed from the wall and floor. A long and tedious task. Once digitized, a simple palette swap a la Sub-Zero and Scorpion would change the uniform's colors, of which there were plenty to choose from since NBA Jam used Midway's T-Unit arcade board.
Our hardware was amazing. It gave us the ability to, most hardware for video games at the time had like 16 colors of just a few palettes they could put on the screen at any one time, or 32 or something like that. But we had the ability to put 256 palettes of 256 colors, which if we were creative enough could make, pretty much make it look like unlimited colors on the screen.
This is the same board that was used in Mortal Kombat 1 and 2 and later in NBA Jam Tournament Edition. Digitization didn't end at the players. The crowd was pulled from video of actual basketball fans, and the court and stands were digitized from DePaul University's basketball court. The referee during tip-off is a Midway employee, and the cheerleaders are played by 2 Playboy models, one of which, Carrie Hoskins, went on to play Sonya Blade in Mortal Kombat. NBA Jam started as a 3-on-3 basketball game.
Go back real quick. The black girl, is the black girl the one that was on the episode of Fresh Prince when he was on Yeah, I think the black girls from
the referee during tip-off is a Midway employee, and the cheerleaders are played by
she was on an episode of Fresh Prince when they went to the Playboy Mansion, and then Middle Child holler, or because he's trying to remember all her turn-ons and turn-offs and everything. Yup.
2 Playboy models, one of which, Carrie Hoskins, went on to play Sonya Blade in Mortal Kombat. NBA Jam started as a 3-on-3 basketball game, but Trammell found that 3 players made the passing mechanics too complicated for the sort of pick-up-and-play gameplay that he had in mind.
At first. Okay.
Once 2-on-2 teams were settled on, Trammell envisioned a cabinet that allowed up to 4 players at one time. By charging 50 cents per 3-minute quarter, and with up to 4 players at a time, the cabinet could potentially earn $8 in less than 15 minutes.
A 4-player cabinet was actually something that Trammell's new boss, Neil Nicastro, had at one point suggested for arch rivals. Nicastro loved the early progress of Trammell's then unnamed basketball game, and he made the decision to try to secure an NBA license for it.
Nice.
This decision would eventually have a major impact on the game's development, but getting the NBA to sign on proved to be easier said than done.
Around July of 1992, Midway's marketing director Roger Sharp met with the NBA's head of non-apparel licensing, Michelle Brown. Sharp brought a pitch video that touted
I like to have a little square just like they have in NBA's.
Midway's successes and highlighted how their game would be different from other basketball titles.
Our new basketball game is being designed to give video game players the ultimate round ball experience. Although we're only a quarter of the way to completion, we've already built in new technologies that will take this game giant steps past anything done before. Everyone who has seen this work in progress agrees we have a hit on our hands.
The tape showed off the game's TV-like presentation, lifelike players that scaled in size depending on their proximity to the camera, a realistic basketball court, and the promise of a live play-by-play announcer. Midway's tape also teased features that wouldn't make it into the final game, such as an undefined coach mode and alternate camera angles. Although Michelle Brown and the NBA were impressed with the presentation, they declined to sign a deal as they didn't want their brand associated with arcades, who still had a reputation in some places for being seedy and drug-filled wastes of time. The NBA's reason...
He has a video about that too. I'm gonna check that out about why video games get drugs, because I was wondering why they had it a lot in a lot of the video games back then.
May sound silly, but even arcade game makers knew about the perception of arcades. Trying to change that perception is a big reason why so many arcade companies were happy to join the FBI's Winners Don't Use Drugs campaign back in 1989. Sharp had other meetings with Brown and provided the NBA with data about arcade earnings, customer demographics, and another videotape that showed arcades in movie theaters, bowling alleys, and other family-friendly places. Eventually, the NBA came around and gave Midway a license on the condition that the NBA could cancel it if the game started showing up in what they felt were seedy locations. The license cost Midway an unknown lump sum, plus, according to Mark Trammell, an additional royalty of $100 to $200 per cab sold. Mark has given slightly different figures in some interviews, but this is the most common average number I've seen from him and others at Midway. The name NBA Jam came from the NBA Jam session events that the NBA was running during its All-Star weekend. The name was shortened to better fit the arcade marquee, and since it was based on one of the NBA's intellectual properties, the NBA got to keep ownership of the NBA Jam name, something that Midway would later regret. Throughout the licensing process, Midway continued working diligently on their game.
Hold on a second. Let me finish up a little bit. Alright.
Initially set out for NBA Jam to be quite so over the top. Instead,
hold on, let me run back a little bit.
NBA's intellectual properties, the NBA got to keep ownership of the NBA Jam name, something that Midway would later regret. Throughout the licensing process, Midway continued working diligently on their game, but Trammell hadn't initially set out for NBA Jam to be quite so over the top. Instead, the exaggerated style came about organically through experimentation and sometimes even accidentally. A good example of this are the super high dunks, which came as a result of trying different numbers of frames between when a player jumps and when their wrist connects to the rim.
And so a player would go up for a dunk, and we knew we had to, reach the rim. And based on how many ticks I would establish for that point of connection, would dictate how high the player would go. If I said, well, get there in 2 seconds, well, it's going to have to go way up and then come way down. If it's 1 second, then it's a little bit more normal.
Which is ironically how the big dunks happen, because like if you just by mistake you'd put in some number that was too big, and the guy would shoot up in the air. It's like, whoa, that was really cool.
Yeah.
Trammell's team was worried that the NBA wouldn't approve of the crazy dunks and exaggerated gameplay that they were creating, but the NBA didn't have any issues with it, not even with shoving players to steal the ball. As development continued, NBA Jam became less about creating a basketball simulation and more about making a thrilling game you'd want to tune into, or better yet, play in. The dev team began making even more eye-catching dunks by splicing together frames from different dunks. For things like the walk cycles, frames were carefully selected to give players lifelike movement while still maintaining a low memory footprint.
Cool.
Having an NBA license.
Cool. Well, hold on for a minute, but yeah, that's pretty cool. And that they did. It definitely changed the game to a lot of arcade games down the line too. That had like the arcade mode. When like later on, like NBA Live and many other basketball games have an arcade mode. We can get away with a lot of stuff, and then have like a crazy dunks, crazy high dunks, and then it was also inspiration to a lot of other games like NBA Streets, NBA Ballers, and many others though. So hold on, I gotta get stuff together. Be right back. I'm back. So yeah, we'll keep going on about NBA Jam though. Like I said, let's keep going.
License changed some aspects of the game's development. The most obvious being putting actual NBA players in the game. The player headshots for the select screen were easy, as the NBA provided those. Since the NBA only provided front-facing photos of the players, it fell to artist Tony Goski to draw the NBA players' heads for gameplay. Goski had to painstakingly hand-draw each player's head from various angles. Using videos and magazine photos as reference, he spent 2 months meticulously crafting the 11 required head angles for each player.
Nice.
NBA Jam's two-man teams were picked out by Mark Turmel and music and sound supervisor John Hay, who used stats, articles, and their own basketball expertise to make their decisions. The NBA approved the team selections, but missing was basketball's most popular star, Michael Jordan, who had left the NBA Players Licensing Agreement. But NBA Jam became so popular that Michael Jordan eventually asked Midway to make him a custom version of the game with him in it. Midway granted Jordan his wish and also made custom versions for Ken Griffey Jr. and Gary Payton, featuring them as selectable players. Programmer Sean Liptak played a pivotal role in NBA Jam, developing the ball physics, player scaling, and figuring out how often shots should land. But it would be Mark Turmel himself that added rubber banding elements to make the gameplay more exciting. Much like how in Mario Kart, the person in last place has a higher chance of getting the lightning bolt item to shrink and slow down the other players, Turmel programmed a team with the lowest score to have a higher chance of making their shots versus the team in the lead.
The idea was to create as close a game as possible so that players would be inclined to put in more money played on the quarter. If that wasn't a devious enough scheme for you, Turmel also made the game clock speed up and down in order to control the game's pace.
NBA Jam wouldn't have free throws, out of bounds, or even fouls to slow down the pace of the game either. If anything, shoving your opponent is encouraged. Outside of 24-second clock violations and goaltending, there really aren't many traditional NBA rules other than the scoring system. Another momentum-shifting game mechanic was the On Fire mode. During lunch one day, programmer Jamie Rivet and Mark Turmel were brainstorming ideas for power-ups. It was Rivet that suggested setting the ball on fire when something quote-unquote cool happened. By the time their lunch was over, they had already outlined their new concept. After scoring 3 shots in a row, a player would be on fire.
On fire!
While on fire, a player's shot accuracy drastically increased and turbo speed was unlimited, tipping the scales of the game in their favor. At least until the opponent scored a basket or the on-fire player missed one.
The on-fire mode added a new layer of strategy, as players would be more likely to shove and generally go after the on-fire opponent to try to make them miss a basket. Mark Turmel also added a special bit of game-swaying code just for him. Turmel was a huge fan of the Detroit Pistons, who had a big rivalry with the Chicago Bulls. Turmel programmed it so that the Bulls would miss any last-second shots taken against the Pistons.
Oh, that's wild.
NBA Jam's music and sound effects came courtesy of John Hay. Hay wrote all of the music.
Shout out to this man. NBA Jam has some dope background music.
In NBA Jam, drawing inspiration from bands like Funkadelic and typical sports broadcast music.
That's why Peg Funk became a hidden character. I love it.
He even recorded himself dribbling and squeaking shoes rather than using stock sound effects. The TV-like presentation in NBA Jam was always the dev team's plan, but perhaps the most important TV-like aspect of NBA Jam's presentation came in the form of its announcer, Tim Kitzrow.
Tim Kitzrow, yep. I think he was the commercial for one of them sports. This is a football commercial I think he did too. I forgot what it was for. I haven't seen it lately. Oh, yep.
For NBA Jam's announcer, John Hay suggested to Turmel that they use local actor and drummer Tim Kitzrow, who had a knack for comedic acting and already had experience doing voiceovers for some pinball games.
Wow.
The initial idea was for the announcer to resemble real-life NBA commentator Marv Albert, who was too expensive to hire. However, it soon became clear that Kitzrow's loud, unique voice and delivery was exactly what NBA Jam needed.
Tim Kitzrow's script was written by John Hay and approved by Turmel. Since NBA Jam's arcade board didn't have a lot of room for commentary, Kitzrow was given short phrases to record. The limited memory space is also why NBA Jam's commentary only uses the player's last name.
Right. Like
Tim Kitzrow's famous Boom Shakalaka catchphrase came as a suggestion from artist John Carlton, who took inspiration from the Boom Laka 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 lyric in I Want to Take You Higher by Sly and the Family Stone. Kitzrow would go on to appear in other games like NHL and NFL Blitz, and is a very popular regular at gaming conventions. With the core gameplay, graphics, presentation, and the voice of NBA Jam in place, Turmel and his team entered the last phase of development and took NBA Jam out for a public test drive.
Oh, nice.
Towards the end of 1992 and late in NBA Jam's development, an early version of the game premiered at Dennis's Place Arcade in Chicago. Turmel and other members of the development team spent several days at Dennis Place watching real players play NBA Jam for the first time. NBA Jam was an instant hit that was almost constantly surrounded by a crowd. As happy as the dev team was by NBA Jam's reception, they did notice some problems. For one, since real NBA players were being used, gamers expected them to behave like they would in real life. In other words, John Stockton should be great at stealing, Reggie Miller should be able to hit most three-pointers, and Shaq should not. But at that point, NBA Jam didn't have a stats system at all, and all the players in the game played the same way. After one of the Dennis arcade sessions, the dev team went back to the office at 2 a.m. and coded a stat system into the game based on 4 player attributes. This added yet another level of strategy as, for example, a player may want to pick a speedier team combo when playing against a slower team. This 2 a.m. session wasn't unusual. Crunch was a big part of the culture at Midway, and NBA Jam's development was no exception, with the dev team often working 80-hour weeks. Turmel realized that with the action moving so fast, it could be difficult to tell who each player was. To fix this, the dev team added what Turmel called bozo boxes before tip-off. These boxes would tell the player who they controlled and their turbo and ID arrow color. NBA Jam's famous Big Head Mode code was added as yet another way to make it easier for players to know where they were by making their NBA players' faces.
Okay, that's why the Big Head Mode was made, and they just to help them for visual reasons. That's pretty awesome. But yeah, that was the most iconic thing about NBA Jam's Big Head Mode.
Easier to recognize. There are also several other gameplay impacting codes that can be entered during the Tonight's Matchup screen, and a hidden free-to-play tank game in early versions of NBA Jam. After finishing the final tweaks to NBA Jam in late 1992, the development team decided to add themselves and a few others to the game as hidden characters that could be unlocked by entering their initials and birthdays. Although there aren't that many secrets and hidden characters in the original NBA Jam game compared to the home ports and its follow-up NBA Jam Tournament Edition, Turmel himself managed to drip-feed information about NBA Jam secrets to gaming magazines to keep interest in the game going throughout its life. Despite the crunch culture, Midway's management was surprisingly hands-off, allowing the dev team to experiment and iterate rapidly as long as they met their deadlines. This hands-off approach helped Turmel's team finish NBA Jam in just 10 months, earning them a 20% royalty bonus for finishing 2 months early. Now poised for release, the question remained, would the public embrace the unique style and over-the-top gameplay of NBA Jam? NBA Jam's debut took place in February of 1993 at the NBA All-Star Weekend. Midway set up a veritable army of arcade cabinets for fans to play, and just like in Chicago, the response was nothing short of electric from both gamers and NBA officials. As Michelle Brown put it, it legitimized the whole arcade category for us. This was the next best thing to playing on the court or attending a game. You're playing coach and you're playing the player.
Pretty much.
NBA Jam also proved to be popular with NBA players. Shaquille O'Neal even had 2 cabinets, one for home and another that traveled with his team. But more importantly, NBA Jam was a huge hit across the nation and was the #1 earning arcade game from April to October of 1993, according to Coin-Op Industry magazine Replay.
According to Turmel, NBA Jam sold 27,000 cabinets, and earned over $1 billion in quarters. Not $1 billion over its lifetime, but $1 billion in its first year alone.
NBA Jam sold so well that Mark Turmell reportedly earned over $1 million in royalties. In January of 1994, Midway released the updated NBA Jam Tournament Edition to arcades. Though much of NBA Jam's core gameplay remained the same, Tournament Edition introduced new features like a tournament mode that removed computer assistance and a larger set of player attributes. Tournament Edition also included an expanded roster for each team, which allowed users to substitute their active on-court players during halftime. Tournament Edition was packed with new secret codes and modes, and the number of secret characters was increased to over 60. Early versions of Tournament Edition included several secret characters like Scorpion and Sub-Zero that were removed from later versions at the request of the NBA, who also forced Midway to remove the ability to break backboards. With its astronomical
that's why they took it. Oh, that's what wasn't on the second one. They made that call. Okay.
Home ports of NBA Jam were inevitable. On March 4th, 1994, NBA Jam came to the Sega Genesis, Super Nintendo, and Sega Game Gear.
Oh, wow.
Later that same year, ports for the Sega CD and Game Boy arrived on store shelves, and by the end of 1995, the following systems had received ports of the original NBA Jam, Tournament Edition, or both. In 1996, Tournament Edition was released for DOS and the Atari Jaguar, the latter of which is a surprisingly good port. These home versions were published by Acclaim, who had a long-standing right of first refusal deal for home console ports of all Midway arcade games. Many of the home ports were fairly close to the arcades. Some team rosters were different, and as to be expected, there were some changes in graphical and sound quality due to hardware limitations. The home ports do have some of their own unique codes and cheats, as well as some different secret characters from the arcade, including politicians. Midway and Mark Turmell's team had created a monster franchise with NBA Jam, turning it into the highest-earning arcade game ever at the time. But almost as quickly as they'd taken to the court, the ball would be stolen right out of Midway's hands. In June of 1994, GamePro reported that Midway and Acclaim's right of first refusal agreement would expire in 1995. Midway opted not to renew the deal and instead enter the home market for themselves by acquiring Trade West and rebranding it to Williams Entertainment, Inc. This left NBA Jam in limbo, as it was the NBA who owned the name and had only given Midway and Acclaim a short-term license. Midway may have created NBA Jam, but it was Acclaim who had turned in several hugely successful home ports, and it was clear that the future of video games was in home consoles.
Much to the surprise of Midway, Acclaim ended up getting the license for NBA Jam. Now, there are conflicting reports about how this happened. According to the book NBA Jam by Rayan Ali, the NBA Jam dev team has alleged that a former Acclaim employee, now working in NBA licensing, misrepresented Midway's interest in wanting to try something new for their next project, as that being a lack of interest in continuing NBA Jam. That same director claims Midway explicitly told him they weren't interested in making another NBA Jam game, leading to Acclaim being granted the license due to their success with the home ports.
Wow.
Whatever the truth may be.
That explains, they probably gonna say how they got that newer NBA Jam, was a 99, whatever, the newer NBA Jam won, the later NBA Jam Extreme, but was like, but it didn't go along with it, and why Midway and them having hang time. Okay.
This was the end of Midway releasing NBA Jam games, and to some, the death of the franchise.
For now.
In 1996, Acclaim released their own arcade sequel to Tournament Edition called NBA Jam Extreme. Extreme ran on a 3D engine, and though it looks completely different from its predecessors, it's still very much a 2-on-2 basketball game in the vein of NBA Jam. Reviews of the arcade version of Extreme that I found were generally positive. In my opinion, the arcade version of Extreme certainly isn't bad, but it just doesn't quite feel like NBA Jam to me. Maybe it's because of the move to 3D, or maybe it's because Tim Kitzrow's replacement on commentary, Marv Albert, just doesn't boom shakalaka quite the same.
Pass it, Reeves, get fake. Boom shakalaka.
Despite the positive reviews, apparently the arcade version of Extreme didn't sell well, and the home ports, which mostly received average to poor reviews, weren't big sellers either. NBA Jam Extreme would be the last arcade NBA Jam game. Midway negotiated a new license with the NBA, and Turmell's team put out their own basketball game in 1996 under the name NBA Hangtime.
Yep. I mean, so. Yep. And you can, the fun part is love bot. They can change the hero of this Ramen by pushing the suck button. Yep.
Kitsura was replaced with Neil Funk this time.
Grizzly has possession. To the floor. Raises up. Incredible.
But Hangtime is a far more direct sequel to Tournament Edition, both in gameplay and visuals. Hangtime featured improved graphics, new moves, and new features like its Create-A-Player. Hangtime sold about 15,000 cabinets, and while that would be considered successful for any other game, it was disappointing coming off Midway's prior NBA Jam sales. Console sales for Hangtime were also decent, but nowhere near that of NBA Jam or Tournament Edition. Towards the end of 1996, Midway released an arcade upgrade named NBA Maximum Hangtime. This version had an updated roster and new secret codes and characters, but the gameplay was basically the same. In 1999, Midway released NBA Showtime, NBA on NBC to arcades as well as to home consoles later that year. Showtime was Midway's own attempt at combining 3D polygons and NBA Jam-like gameplay. Showtime sold well at home and in the arcades, but again, nothing like NBA Jam's heyday. In 2001, Midway released NBA Hoops on home consoles only. Hoops is often considered the last direct descendant of the original NBA Jam's dev team, though it uses 3-on-3 teams instead of NBA Jam's traditional 2-on-2. Acclaim released several more NBA Jam games between 1998 and 2003, changing the formula up here and there with each game. Some games like NBA Jam 1999 and NBA Jam 2000 even have traditional 5-on-5 teams. Acclaim's final NBA Jam game was simply titled NBA Jam and was released for the PS2 and Xbox in 2003. In 2004, Acclaim filed for bankruptcy and went out of business. The NBA Jam franchise remained dead until EA Sports acquired the rights to it and released yet another game titled NBA Jam in 2010. This game was initially released for the Wii, PS3, and Xbox 360.
NBA Jam on Fire Edition. It's a bird, it's a plane, it's an alley-oop jam!
As of the making of this video, the final NBA Jam game was EA Sports NBA Jam on Fire Edition, which was only released digitally for the Xbox 360 and PS3 in 2011 and is unfortunately no longer available for purchase. I wasn't able to find a concrete answer as to why EA Sports, who still has the license to the NBA Jam name, hasn't released an entry since 2011. 2K does have a $1.1 billion licensing deal with the NBA to make NBA 2K games, but reportedly the deal is not exclusive, and EA Sports themselves were releasing NBA Live titles through 2018. I believe that the reason why we haven't seen a new NBA Jam game from EA Sports boils down to disappointing sales. I wasn't able to get total sales numbers, but 2010's NBA Jam sold less than 50,000 copies during its first month, priced at $50 a piece. When EA released 2011's On Fire sequel, they didn't think it would sell enough to warrant a physical release, and even priced it significantly lower at $14.99. It's too bad, as both games were generally well reviewed, and Mark Turmell even consulted on the 2010 NBA Jam. NBA Jam's legacy and influence can be seen in other titles like NFL Blitz, another Midway mega hit that applied NBA Jam's exaggerated reality formula to football. Today, there are plenty of ways to play NBA Jam, from emulating the arcade originals to playing one of the many home ports or buying an officially licensed NBA Jam cabinet from Arcade 1UP. Even in 2024, almost any old school arcade you walk into will probably have an NBA Jam or Tournament Edition arcade cabinet. Much of NBA Jam's original development team is still involved in the gaming industry, including Mark Turmell, who is currently with Zynga. Mark Turmell and his team created a unique basketball game that was somehow both grounded in realism and the absurd. One moment you were looking at a detailed replica of a basketball court and game scores that looked like they were right out of a TV broadcast. Next, you were 30 feet in the air with a flaming basketball in your hands. Yet somehow, it all works.
When Mark Turmell was just 20 years old, he was interviewed by Electronic Fun with Computers and Games magazine in 1982. When he was asked what he thinks the elements of a good game are, Turmell replied, color, fast action, and sound. That sure sounds a lot like NBA Jam. I didn't spend too much time diving into the secret players and codes, as those have kind of been covered to death already and would really just pad the runtime of the video. If you want to learn the technical details of how NBA Jam's rubber banding works, I recommend checking out my buddy MVG's video about how NBA Jam cheats. As always, a big thank you to
this was a cool video to watch though. I definitely want to follow time to watch more of his videos as well too. I have made like added in the playlist. I made my own little video game reaction play as well too to check out some of the stuff. Like he talked about, he got a lot of stuff. Let me bring up the ones he that I have possibly in my list that I'll possibly be doing sooner or later though. Hold on. He has one about one of my favorite game show. I'm gonna keep it hush because that might be my next one I'll do. He got a lot of story about certain games, including sport games, especially with EA and D. I remember the winners don't use drug thing. I might do that pretty soon. Story of enhancement that helps you cheat in games as well too, and commercials. So yeah, I'm gonna check out more from Wrestling with Gaming though. This is a cool video, and he definitely broke it down pretty good. I see he's a Wrestling with Gaming. Duh. Well, okay, that's what he has on. That is Wrestling with Gaming, but with New Japan. I like it. Other than that, if you like my reaction, like, share, subscribe to my YouTube channel. If you do want me to do more of these, let me know as well too. I might still do it anyway, but if you want me to do more of these, definitely comment below as well too. It's your boy T-Bird signing off. One love.